Hi everyone, my name is Renee, Program Officer with EcoSchools Canada. On behalf of EcoSchools, thank you for viewing this webinar as part of the 2023 EcoSummit. I'm pleased to introduce Jennifer Budden from Toronto District School Board to present this webinar, Living the Dish with One Spoon. Jennifer is a K-5 educator from Toronto, situated on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. She has a background in international education and development work, which took her to countries including the Philippines, Liberia, Madagascar, and Somalia, working in education and emergencies, environmental education, curriculum development, and classroom teaching. She strives to make learning about the environment hands-on and fun, so students can develop a love for the planet and take action to protect it. She's currently the teacher librarian and grade 4 and 5 core French teacher, leading the EcoSchools team and the Eco-Literacy program at Parkside Elementary School in East York. Be sure to check out the accompanying worksheets for this webinar, which can be found linked in the description below and in the presentation schedule at ecoschools.ca/EcoSummit. We would also like to acknowledge that the EcoSummit has been made possible with support from Natural Resources Canada. We're glad to have you join us for this presentation, and now I will pass it over to Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jen, and as Renee mentioned, I teach French and library at a K-5 school in Toronto. And this presentation is for anyone, students and teachers alike, interested in the Greenbelt Biodiversity Action for EcoSchools Canada. And you might be wondering what this could look like at your school. You might be wondering, what is a Greenbelt? Why are they important? What community connections could I make through this action? And how I could connect this goal to truth and reconciliation and climate justice actions. So I'd just like to take a minute to say I'm no expert and just sharing some ideas to hope that you might all find some inspiration. I'm more than a little sad that this format only allows for one-way communication, and so I wanted to share my contact and email address right at the beginning in hopes that some of the folks on this webinar might reach out so we can share ideas and collaborate. And I also wanted to just say thank you for participating and thanks for being part of EcoSchools. So basically, if you don't already know, the Greenbelt is a large swath of protected land that includes many types of land use, different from traditional conservation, which exclusively protects wild or untouched areas, because the Greenbelt does allow for some human development, notably farmland and existing urban areas. As you can see from this list, they've been created all over the world, and it's really part of an international environmental movement. So this is the Greenbelt around Toronto, which I will be speaking more specifically to based on what our students have worked on. I teach at Parkside, which you can see the little happy face on the map is along the edge of the Taylor Creek, which flows into the Don River, connected to the Great Lakes through Lake Ontario. And we are lucky at our school to not just have a large schoolyard, but also back onto part of the Toronto Ravine system. And there's a long stairway that leads down from our yard straight into the ravine, which makes access to nature easy in the city. But that being said, you don't need to have that access in order to participate in this action. So for those of you who haven't seen the action yet on the EcoSchools website, this is really the first place to start because it is an incredible resource. And even though it's called the Plant Inventory Guide, it really guides the entire action. It's not necessarily a list of different plants to look for. It's really outlining how to best take advantage of this action to get your students excited and also plan out this action so that you can successfully get points for certification. This is only my second year running EcoSchools, and when you are filling out the certification questions, they're constantly referring back to the guides and the resources because they really help you think through the steps that you need to take to bring the learning and actions to the next level. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but I just wanted to speak a little bit more about what we do at Parkside. And we're lucky to have our library set up as a learning commons and do partner teaching using inquiry and environmental literacy as pillars to our programming, along with literacy and STEM. We also try to integrate as much as we can and have a lot of admin support to help plan with different grades. And I first heard about this kind of approach by another teacher librarian team when I attended an online environmental conference, Thirsty for Ideas, in 2021. So I want to say a big thank you to Nancy and Melissa from Cresthaven Public School, who inspired me and all of us at Parkside to start implementing this kind of programming at our school too. So here we're setting the stage for a meaningful connection of this Greenbelt Biodiversity Action for EcoSchools and connect that to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And our fall inquiry question for the grade 3s and 4s was what makes an ideal school community? So as part of our pledge for Orange T-shirt Day, we're trying to learn throughout the year more about the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement and how it applies to sustainability today. Okay, so going back to the plant inventory guide, you can see how as an educator you need to learn about the Ontario Greenbelt and figure out what aspects you want to focus on. Are you doing a deep dive on watersheds? Are you looking at agriculture and alternative practices like low-till or no-till compared to fertilizers and more machine interventions? Are you looking at endangered species? Species at risk? There are so many angles to take, so I'm going to just breeze through the next few slides to show you how we looked at it at our schools so far. So from a grade 3 and 4 level, we are combining our social studies and science subjects and looking at jobs and land use, as well as the life systems of plants and soil. And this really ties together in the grade 4 curriculum, looking at some of the ways humans need, want, and impact the land. The Greenbelt Foundation newsletters are a great source of information because they highlight lots of cool information about the Greenbelt, like these short bios on different women in different kinds of agriculture in Ontario working in the Greenbelt. And the Greenbelt in Ontario has some of the richest farmland in Canada, and it's right beside the country's highest urban population. So this is pretty key about thinking and learning about how the Greenbelt protects us from flooding. The trees help us keep our hot temperatures cooler. They provide us with clean air, water, and local food supply. If there's nothing else that you take away from this presentation, it really should be that the Greenbelt helps protect us, and so that's why we need to protect them. So why is urban sprawl a problem? As you look at this infographic, you can see the image on your left has only 10% of runoff compared to the amount of 55% in the urban landscape. So this runoff has contributes not only to increased flood risk, but also changes the natural flow of water back into the watershed, and that impacts the health of the surrounding habitats. And habitat and biodiversity is really what we focused on with our grade 3s and 4s, and looking at how natural habitat of animals is supported and protected by the Greenbelt. And since so many of you may not live necessarily in Ontario, maybe there is a local network or recognizable logo in your neighborhood that connects to conservation that students could look for. I'm actually going to just leave the slides for a second to show you this other cool resource from the Greenbelt Foundation. We wrapped up our background knowledge on the Greenbelt with an interactive map and slide scavenger hunt, which showed change over time of the protected area in Ontario. And I bet the older students would be really pro at making interactive GIFs or cool infographics on land use and show similar patterns and trends that are happening in your local area. So this is a pretty neat resource to look at and be inspired by for mapping creation for social studies. So now I'll just head back into my slides, and our next action was doing like an introductory school ground scavenger hunt. This was a practice for students to use field guides, magnifying glasses, and plant and insect identification skills. Another great app to use is Seek by iNaturalist, which is a little bit easier to use than iNaturalist itself. And just to give you a chance to get the feel of how to identify plants and get enthusiasm going, and really helping students get involved in the discovery process. Even if it's just a common burr, if you're able to find it and locate it and identify it on your field guide, it really creates a lot of excitement and confidence, and that's what we're looking for. So we also did a wetland habitat walk, and was again another introduction to a field experience. Students found snails and grasshoppers. Here we are by the pond. There were cattails and willow trees, goldenrod galls, and duckweed all nearby. And we simply made a list of all the different species we found, and then connected that to building food chains and food webs for wetland habitat. We built off of student experience in earlier grades about learning about the iconic monarch butterfly for our plant inventory action. So we focused on 2 easy to identify native species, one of which is the milkweed that is the host and larval plant for monarch butterflies, as well as goldenrod, which is very easy to find and very easy to identify. Along with that, they are both threatened because of human development and agricultural expansion. And then to complement those native species at risk, we looked at invasive species such as dog-strangling vine, which is a milkweed look-alike, and the pervasive garlic mustard. So keeping it pretty simple, we made field guides with these 4 plants, printed them out, put them in plastic sheets with protectors. Students worked in partners, had a clipboard and a pencil, so you didn't need a lot of materials. And then we got them down in the valley, and this actually I think is a picture of us going up from the valley, but you get a sense of how green it is. And here we are on our official biodiversity inventory action walk in the Greenbelt. Students worked in partners. They identified, sketched, counted, and recorded with lots of enthusiasm. We had 2 teachers, myself and the 3-4 homeroom teacher, and 1 parent volunteer. You always run into something unexpected and exciting that is not in the field guide, so it is good to keep it focused and also have a lot of excitement for new and interesting things that you come across. Here is a snapshot of what our class recording looked like for the actual action. It is not the most scientific data, but for us, that was not the main goal. It was more about understanding what a native species is, what the invasive species is, and what their impact on each other is. So at the end of the day, they learned at least 4 more plants and the pros and cons of both. We also were able to collect information to answer the EcoSchools actions, but it's really all of the learning that goes around that as well. So you might be asking, how am I going to take all of these activities and make it applicable to my neighborhood or our local school grounds? So you really want to be asking yourself what invasive species are active in your neighborhood, what plant species need support, like maybe more milkweed, or and how that impacts other species like insects or birds or fish, what have you. Are you going to be planting? Are you going to be removing invasive species? And what are the local community partners that you can connect with to bring in multiple perspectives and best practices? So we are lucky enough to have established a relationship with an indigenous knowledge keeper who's going to come in for some workshops with staff, with parents, and with students about both sacred, how plants were used in the past and currently for food, shelter, and medicine by First Nations peoples. We are developing a network with other schools that are involved in EcoSchools, but also we have partnered with a high school that runs a green industries program, and that's very exciting. They're going to help us build some raised beds that we'll hopefully be able to plant native species in on our school grounds. We, of course, have been, in the past, worked with students and parent groups to help maintain and water any planting that we do over the summer. That's super important and essential to maintaining all of this work that we've done throughout the year. We've connected with the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, especially about that action of removing invasive species, because you want to be careful about not spreading more seed if the plant has already gone to seed. So knowing how to identify the best times to do that work. And also another partnership that could be really important are local NGOs that work in gardening and that could come and do a grounds assessment and give you tips for rewilding or any gardening around your school, and replacing more traditional, perhaps invasive species with native species that would support the habitat. So this is now my last slide, and what I wanted to leave you with is just my hope that you get inspired to take action and that you participate in this great action. It's the first year that we've had it for EcoSchools, and it's pretty exciting. And if you want to get more political, there's lots of options to do that. You can join a letter writing campaign to elected officials, sign petitions, join future Friday protests in your area, or even just create a bigger forum to discuss the issues from all sides. Because protecting green belts around the world is part of a global movement. It's very current and very pressing, and yeah, it's super, super exciting, and I hope that you choose to take on this action for your EcoSchools plan. Thanks so much for listening.